Good morning, YouTube. Welcome to the Reptile Barn. I am looking forward to this vlog. I wish, and that's the point of this vlog, that I had seen something like this before we ever bought our first snake. Okay, so I want to talk about things that I think are important in building your reptile collection, your breeding collection, right? Because most breeders have their pets, right? Animals that either they never breed them, or if they do, it's just for fun. But I'm talking about your animals that you specifically are purchasing to breed. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. And a lot of this I'm going to be referencing ball pythons, but most of these points should carry over to pretty much any breeding project. Okay, doesn't have to be ball pythons. And I've got out Greg here. He is both one of my favorite snakes, favorite animals of all time, and also a perfect representation of many of these collection building mistakes that we made at the Reptile Barn, okay? So I love him. He's beautiful. He's amazing. I do not regret buying him for 1 second, but my business probably does, okay? And let me explain why. So I'm just going to go through point by point here. The very first thing that I should bring up, and I'll try and explain why, you don't just have to take my word for it, is that in general, you want to get your females first. Greg is a male. He was the first ball python we ever bought. There's a few reasons for this. One, most of the time, pretty much all the time, your females are going to take longer to raise up to breeding size. So, because most ball python morphs and many other species, morphs, localities, etc., depreciate in value, if you buy your male and then he has to sit around waiting, and then you go later on and get your females and he's getting less valuable every year. Whereas if you get your females first and then at the last minute you get your male, you didn't spend that extra money before he's actually ready to breed. So one of it's just timing. Your females are going to need to be older than your male is before they can breed. That kind of plays in with many of these other points that I'm going to make. So at the very least, you should get them at the same time, right? But that's okay. So this happened to us. We got Greg, and then we also got a little group of females. The females were a little bit younger and smaller than him, so he was ready to go. They were not. So we ended up just having some time to bond, right, with Greg here before it was time to actually breed him. By the way, he is a desert ghost ball python. Came from Fred Kicks. This was back almost 9 years ago. Wow. That's crazy. We've had him for a while. Great morph, great snake, great species. Again, we did know some things. We weren't thinking about that timing aspect. Second thing, and this is kind of a multifaceted point. Your males should be, again, we're talking about your breeding projects, genetically superior to your females. This is strictly a numbers game. You can, with almost all reptiles, breed a male to multiple or even many females, okay? So let's just pretend that you're going to go out and buy 5 animals, 1 male and 4 females. And you buy a $100 male, 3 of your females are $100, and 1 of those females is $1,000, okay? Well, whatever is causing your male to be less valuable than that $1,000 female, he's only a $100 male, that clutch from him to that female, let's say all the babies are worth $500. You breed him to the $100 females. All those babies are worth $100, okay? So you're fine. You made some money. Well, let's say you spent $1,000 on your male and then $100, $100, $100, $100 on each female. That male's genetics are going to pass on to every single baby now because he's breeding all the females. So each of those $100 females is going to be producing, and again, this is just a complete example. I'm not saying that this is the exact numbers that's going to happen. It's not like it cuts in half, but let's say every single baby you produce is a $500 baby. across 4 females clutches, that adds up to a lot more. You also have more potential holdbacks because you got so many more babies with those superior genetics. It's just business-wise, it's better. It is just better to get a genetically superior male to put to your females. Okay, so if you have a budget and you know what your budget is, you know roughly how many animals you can handle, put a larger chunk of that investment into the male than the females in the project. Okay, that's just a rule of thumb that almost always plays out correctly. But something that I think personally with ball pythons, this does not apply to everything, but generally the morph species, the popular morph species, ball pythons, corn snakes, leopard geckos, crested geckos, bearded dragons, boas, retics, don't buy snakes or lizards or whatever that are going to be able to produce normals, okay? For many reasons. One, while the economy is hot and doing great, you can pretty much sell everything. When it's not, when it's slow, which it has been recently, it's very, very, very difficult to sell those normals, and you're going to end up with a very large collection that you're caring for, and they cost just as much to feed and house and just as much time to care for as if you had a rack full of $1,000 animals, right? So if you're trying to place these animals in good homes, you're not just trying to like move them off on wholesalers as fast as you possibly can for $3 a snake, then you want animals that are going to stand out more. And even though beauty is completely in the eye of the beholder, and I happen to think that a normal ball python is one of the most beautiful looks that a ball python can have, the public does not agree with me. They're more excited by morphs. So it's harder to move a normal. So just when you're planning your combos and your projects, make sure, I mean, the genetics are so easy, they're Mendelian. You can ensure that you will not produce normals, or make a very, 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 very tiny chance of ever producing normals, where you've got, 4 or 5 different incomplete dominant genes all at play. The chances of getting a normal astronomically small. Do that, okay? Just, you're building your collection from the beginning. You might as well save yourself from some of these things. And that plays right into my next point. Have a minimum price point in mind, where you're like, I see what these animals are going for on Morph Market, on anywhere else that sales are made. I know what combinations are possible from these animals that I'm going to be breeding, or from this species that I've selected. Have a price point in mind. It's 2023 right now. This, if you're watching this video 15 years from now or whatever, which that would be kind of weird, this will be different maybe. But right now, I would say a good minimum price point is something like $300. Okay, you want your babies. I'm not talking about the invert world, by the way. This is reptiles, okay? But for reptiles, aim for your cheapest babies you can possibly produce to be something like $300, okay? Again, just save yourself the labor, the stress of trying to move $50 normals. And it's not just normals. These days, a single gene animal, other than some of the more rare recessives, are not going to hit $300. So go for combos that have enough genes that look good together that is going to be at least $300 per sale, right? That is better for your business. It's also better for the animals because they're more likely to get purchased as a young baby and move into their new spot and acclimate quickly, and just everything is better, okay? So all those things are kind of decisions you got to make before you buy any animal, right? And this is where we messed up. We bought this visual desert ghost and then some het females. So not only were we waiting extra time for those females to raise up while Greg was just sitting around, when we did produce clutches, we got some visuals, which was great. We also got hets. And these hets looked like a normal. They were not very expensive, and they took a very long time to sell. This still afflicts us and every other breeder to this day, right? Now, I know some of you might be listening to this and it's kind of shocking to hear me talk about these animals as if they're lower value. I only mean financially, okay? The value of the animal's life is exactly as high as the $30,000 whatever new morph, whatever, right? Albino alligator, I don't care what it is. A normal ball python is worth intrinsically just as much. But for your business, it's better for you to just not produce them in the first place unless they're going to make a certain amount of money, sell at a certain level of ease, right? So no normals, minimum price point. Get your males first. I'm sorry, get your females first, but have your males be a little bit more superior genetics. Don't skimp entirely on those incomplete dominant genes. What do I mean by that? If you have a project in mind, okay, and you don't want to produce normal, say you're working with recessives though, and the first generation is going to look like normals because they're hets. Well, maybe you need to get, say you're wanting to do a clown pied project, okay? And your male is going to be a clown and your female is a pied. If you just breed a clown to a pied, your babies are all double hets, which is great, but they look like normals. And the males especially are not going to be very valuable. If you got your male clown and you got a blackhead yellow belly clown, and your female pied is I don't know, a pastel pied or whatever. It doesn't really matter. A mahogany pied, right? Well, in this very first generation, you're not going to have visual clowns or pieds still, but you are going to have visual morphs in your babies. You know, when you can stick out more, you're not just listing for sale some double hets. You're like, I've got blackheads, yellow bellies, all these things. I've got mahoganies, and they're all double het for clown and pied. That sets you apart a little bit better to potential customers. It also sets you forward better on your project. You know, you can save yourself years. We really messed up in this, okay? We've produced a bunch of visual desert ghosts with nothing else in them. Only very recently were we like, oh, what have we done? We've had desert ghosts in the collection for 9 years, and we've barely made combos. What are we thinking? We should have, from the very beginning, gotten maybe a couple fewer animals because they would have been more expensive, but a combo male. You know, again, I love Greg. I'm happy we have him, but we shouldn't have bought him business-wise. We should have bought a pastel desert ghost or whatever. Our female hets should have been yellow belly hets and orange dream hets and whatever, right? So that by year 2 or 3, instead of year 9, we're producing visual combos. We would have made more money. We would have had an easier time making sales. We would have better holdbacks that are breeding today. Everything would have been set forward by years if we had just spent a little bit more money on a fewer snakes, a lower number of snakes at the beginning, right? We didn't, and we learned, but that's what we should have done when we were building our collection. And the last 2 things, this is real quick. Too many projects will dilute your progress. You know, we tend to follow the massive, very successful breeders on social media. We're watching Mutation Creation, we're watching Ozzy Boyd, we're watching Justin Kabilka, and they have hundreds and hundreds of snakes breeding. So they can afford to really push hard on dozens of projects. And it works great. But most of us do not have that number of snakes that we're able to breed every year. And so what has happened to us is, like I was just talking about, you know, we've had desert ghosts forever, we've had ultramels forever, but we have not combined them in very many ways because we don't have, you know, 20 desert ghosts breeding. We have like 4. We don't have 20 ultramels. For most of the time we had like 2 and they were hets, right? And so it took a very long time to combine more genes into these projects because we had, you know, clowns, pieds, desert ghosts, puzzle. We wanted to get into sunset. We had ultramels. We had lavender albinos. We had a lot of projects going with a very tiny number of snakes per project. And while it's fun to buy into those projects and have those genes represented in your collection, and you're thinking of all the things you're going to do with it in the future, it's going to be like 30 years in the future, right? Whereas if we had just said, we're Desert Ghost people, that's how it is, or we're Tri-Stripe people, that's how it is. Pick 2 or 3. I'm not saying pick one thing, but if you do, though, you would sometimes end up the best of the best. You ever heard of JD Constriction? Check them out. They have by no means the largest collection of ball pythons, not even close. But you want to know who has the best axanthic projects in every conceivable way? It is them. They just dominate with axanthics because that's his entire focus, right? And of course he's able to make the most axanthic combos because that's all he does, right? And he's highly successful at it. His snakes are incredible. Everyone just loves looking at his stuff. So too many projects will dilute your success, your progress, right? And that's not just a ball python thing. Anything with morphs, that's the case, but even just too many species. Now, I want to be careful because I don't want to contradict my last point here. But if you have too many things and you can't become really honed in and expert on any of them, you're going to be a mediocre name across every single project. You're never going to rise above the very large number of people who are breeding reptiles and stick out for a good reason, right? But my very last point here, you have to keep it fun. You have to. If you think of investing. The best investors and financial advisors, etc., they're going to tell you like 10% of your budget at least, you got to go have fun with it. If you make X amount of money, you got to take 10% of that and you got to just go buy yourself something nice, go out to dinner, go to the movies. We're not all rich. You can't just go out and buy yourself a nice car necessarily with all this extra money you've got, but you got to take some of your money and you have to enjoy it. You have to. It's the same thing when you're building your collection. For a few things, don't worry about if it's going to make a ton of money. Don't worry about, what am I going to make this combo into down the road? If there's just a species that you want or a morph that you want because it is your favorite and it is your dream animal, you should probably get it within reason. Control yourself, but a little bit of your time and effort should be spent on you when you are building your collection. We have hardly ever had any success at all with tree monitors. Never made a penny off tree monitors. They take up a ton of our space, ton of our time. They're very expensive, and we haven't had a ton of success, and yet we don't care. We will keep tree monitors forever, whether they breed for us successfully or not. We love them. They are just a dream animal, always have been. We love having them, and so we have them, Hasn't worked out business-wise, but that's okay. You have to be able to do that. And especially in a morph animal, you got to be careful. If you're like always just chasing the trend, you're going to be 2 years behind the trend, and by the time you're breeding it, it's moved on and the trend is elsewhere. So if you're just watching your favorite breeder and you're like, oh, his whatever project is super popular right now, so I'm going to get into that. That might not work. It might, but it might not, because they're always going to be the best at it because they got into it first. They're always going to have the biggest name, and people are going to want to buy from them first because they made the project popular. And it might fade in popularity before you manage to buy into it, raise them up, and produce your own, right? So pick stuff that you are excited about. Again, within reason. If what excites you the most happens to only ever sell for $50, don't go too crazy with that project as far as your business goes. But you must enjoy your collection. You must. Or I just don't see any way you can be successful at it. I also don't see any way you're going to persevere. If you're only keeping things because you're like, I hope this one makes me money, but you don't really love that project, I can't imagine you're going to have a lot of success. So again, this video was not about, love of the animals, even though that's so important. It was really about, good practical advice, I hope, on how to build your collection from the beginning. Or maybe you've already built your collection and you're running into some of these issues, and there's now things that hopefully I helped you understand that you could adjust to be more streamlined and more productive and more successful as you move forward. You got to make some tough choices. Greg is retired. He doesn't breed. He's not genetically powerful enough anymore for our Desert Ghost projects. We keep him because he's one of our favorite animals of all time. It's okay. But he doesn't breed. He's retired. There's no point for us breeding him. We have genetically superior males. We have several animals in that boat that we just can't bring ourselves to sell. But some animals we have sold. You know, these breeders who are constantly progressing, they are selling adults all the time. Even very, very healthy, perfect, powerful female, they are selling their adults because they're constantly holding back animals that are one step further into that project, right? And once those reach breeding age, it doesn't make sense anymore to breed the previous generation. You gotta keep moving forward. Now that doesn't apply so much with species that don't have morphs, but with at least the morph species, that's something you gotta keep in mind, is that you're gonna be selling adults all the time. Once you get 5 or 6 years in, you're going to be selling adults, at least a couple of them every year, because you should be holding back your best babies every year. So, I didn't want this to be too long. It probably is too long, but I think it's super useful, and I didn't mean to demean Greg here. He is a spectacular animal, but he just really does represent what we didn't know when we first started buying reptiles. And you guys who are familiar with my collection, we have a lot of species. We do not breed most of them yet. Many of them are young, being raised up, and we will breed them in the future. But we have a lot of species, like 20 species or so. And so maybe we lean too far into the, you got to have fun and enjoy your collection. We just kept buying our favorite things, whether or not it made business sense, but we're going to make it make business sense. Anyways, I could keep talking about this. There's a lot of thoughts rolling through my mind, but I don't want to, maybe I'll make a new vlog continuing or something like that, but I gotta wrap it up. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this was helpful. Until next time, we're the Reptile Barn.